All right. I think we are ready to go. Let me just share this really quick. All right. We're ready to go. Okay. Okay. All right. If you're alive and you're hearing me, type something in the chat. Let me know you're here. Okay. Got some people coming in still. I'm going to wait a little bit longer. All right. Come on in. We're going to have a nice little chat about this past week. Okay. Okay. All right. Well, I'm just going to go ahead and get started and just let people come in. Just kind of want to share some off the cuff thoughts. I wasn't even thinking about going live tonight, but I figured why not just do a few minutes of a video just on some things that have been on my mind. Now, first thing I want to talk about is the inauguration and, Biden stepping into the Oval Office, all that good stuff. Oh, wait. The chat won't allow comments. What the heck? Okay, somebody's letting me know that the chat's not letting people to talk or to allow comments. That sounds kind of racist to me, if you ask me. But oh well. I mean that's okay. At least I know people are here watching. All right, so yeah, let's get started. So regarding the inauguration, um, and not just the inauguration. I don't want to just limit it to that one event, but I don't know if any of you have noticed this, but people don't really seem to be that excited about Biden. I mean, I know that there are some people who are very excited about him being the president, but I think more people are just excited that Trump is out of office. I mean, on the left, whether it's the far left or the not so far left, what I'm seeing is that people just wanted to get rid of Trump, and I think the polling actually bore that out. Shortly after the election, I want to say it was like 56% of people were basically voting against Trump and not necessarily for Biden. I could be wrong about that. I'll look that up. So don't hold me to that. But either way, I do know that a large number of Biden's supporters were really just against Trump. And if you look at the inauguration, and I do understand they didn't invite as many people to the event. I'm not really talking about the crowd size because that's not important, especially with the way the event was held. It was never going to have a large crowd size. They didn't want that. But it just seemed like people it was just kind of lackluster, and the media was really trying to hype this up. I mean, if you look at how the activist media is covering Biden, I mean, they're giving him glowing reviews, even though he hasn't done anything yet. And same with Kamala Harris. And I get that with Kamala Harris, it's a little bit different because we have we have like a historical thing happening here since she's the first woman of color to be the vice president. So I know that Democrats are really excited about that, and honestly, I think it's a good thing. I mean, at least that part of it. It's the same thing that I felt when Obama was elected. But then again, I mean, just compare the two. I mean, remember how excited people were for Obama becoming president, and a lot of it was about the historical significance, with basically with him being the first black president, and first black president who actually identifies as black. I mean, Kamala kind of identifies with both sides of her heritage, which is perfectly fine. But Obama was the first black president. But even with Obama, it wasn't just the fact that he was black. I mean, that wasn't his only appeal. I mean, the man could give a speech. He was inspiring. He knew how to speak to people's hearts. I mean, even though I wasn't a fan of his, and I knew I wasn't going to like a lot of his policies, I could at least say, when I watched the speech, I felt better after having listened to it, even though I knew that a lot of it was a lot of crap. So, but still, I mean, you compare that to even Trump. I mean, people hated that Trump got elected, but the people who supported him, they loved it. They were excited. They were pumped. I'm not seeing that with Biden at all. I'm really not seeing it. I see the media trying to manufacture it. But I mean, I've said this on a couple live streams. I've said it, on the Red Black Show. I've said it on Liberty Nation's Conservative 5. But it feels like the media, the way they look to me is, when it comes to Biden, they look like somebody who was opening a Christmas present that they hate, but the person who gave it to them is there, so they have to act like they like it. That's what I'm seeing from the media. Like, they're really trying to get people excited about this, and they're just not. Now, I'm not. I mean, there could be plenty of reasons why this is, right? But it doesn't bode well for the Biden administration. I think that even though the activist media is still going to cover for him if he does something wrong, or if he says something wrong, or if he has one of his famous gaffes, the American public is still going to see through that. I mean, and the reason I'm mentioning that is because, I mean, I'm pretty sure that he's not going to make it through his full first term. I'm not saying he's going to drop dead. I'm just saying that he's up there. He's almost 80 years old. I don't see him making it the full 4 years. I think he'll step down after the 2022 midterms. I could be wrong about it, but it's a prediction. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But I don't think he's going to make it all the way through. I think Kamala Harris is going to end up being in the Oval Office. And I don't think that people are really excited about her either. I mean, like I said, they're excited about the fact that it's a historical it's a historical thing that's happening here with her. But look at how she did during the Democratic primaries. Nobody wanted her to be president, and they didn't even want her as vice president. I'll put it this way: if it wasn't for the historical significance, people probably wouldn't be as pumped about it. And even with that, they're still not that pumped. So when she takes over, I mean, I think that she'll do a lot of damage. And I think that, well, depending on whether or not the Democrats still have both chambers of Congress. But we know that Kamala Harris is very far to the left, although she is more pragmatic. So I could see her kind of going a little bit, moderating a little bit. But honestly, I mean, the progressive wing of the party probably isn't going to let her moderate too much. Biden will get away with moderating a little bit more than a Kamala Harris would. But I think that bodes well for the Republicans in 2024. I mean, these are two people who aren't very exciting. And I think as long as the Republicans aren't stupid, which could very well happen. I mean, we know that the Republicans can snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. We know they tend to make stupid decisions. But I mean, if they put up somebody who seems confident, who seems like he can inspire the base, I mean, the Republicans are going to have the presidency back in just 4 years. I don't believe that the Democrats will hold on to it for another 8 years, unless, like I said, the Republicans do something really stupid. So that's why I wanted to bring that up, because it kind of, gives us an idea of what will happen in the future. It's also one of the reasons why I'm not that concerned about Trump losing. I know a lot of people don't want to hear me say that, but I don't care as much about Trump losing. Now, I really wouldn't have cared if we would have held on to the Senate, but the fact that we lost that, now I am concerned. I think that damage can be done because Republicans didn't have any power, and they have nobody except themselves to blame for that. They can't blame voter fraud. They can't blame anything else. The Democrats were playing chess. We were playing checkers. I mean, Stacey Abrams registered almost 1 million new voters, and you know they weren't voting Republican. So while we were busy making fun of her weight and making fun of her looks and that kind of stupidity, she was on the ground hustling and getting stuff done. And you know what? They're going to start doing it in other southern states as well. I read that. I almost wrote about it, but they're not going to just try to do this in Georgia. They're going to keep doing this in Georgia, and they're going to try to replicate it. I mean, they're already trying to do it here in Texas. And I knew that they weren't going to turn Texas blue during this election season. It'll take a while if they're able to succeed at it. But the Republican Party here in Texas, they need to get wise to what the Democrats are doing. They can't afford to sit on their laurels and think, oh, Texas will always be red, because that's not necessarily true. But if we play our cards right, we can get the power right back. In 2022, I think we're going to see some wins there. I don't think that the Democrats will have both chambers of commerce. One of the reasons is because they're being really stupid right now. This is where the Democrats are being stupid, and that brings me to the second thing I wanted to talk about: impeachment. Impeachment, and this isn't the only example of overreach that the Democrats are doing right now, and it won't be the only example that they're going to do going forward. When the riots happened at the U.S. Capitol, they jumped on that. Remember? I mean, they milked that for every single thing that they could. And you look at what happened with social media. They use that as an excuse to censor conservatives. They use that as an excuse to ban President Trump's account, or former President Trump, to ban his Twitter account. And then they did the Great Purge. I think they're kind of still doing it, because I've been gaining followers and then losing them soon after. So they targeted mostly conservatives, and it's not because they're concerned about incitement to violence. That's a lie. They know that's not true. Even the tweets that they pointed out that Trump supposedly posted that were supposed to incite violence, they're not relevant to their case. And I'm going to explain that in just a second, because it ties into impeachment. But there's no way that they're going to convince me that every single one of the people that they purged was inciting violence or violating their terms and conditions. On top of that, they weren't doing this to left-leaning accounts. I tried to find out, I looked, and if it is happening to them, it's not happening to them that much. So this is like the most brazen example of them applying their terms and conditions in a way that is biased based on political affiliation. Now, private company, they can do whatever they want, at least until the government gets involved. But then what happened? They went after Parler, because they could just say, oh, well, just go to Parler. I mean, if we don't want you here, go to Parler. No, they wanted to shut down Parler too. They wanted to destroy that because, like I keep saying, and I know that the people watching this that are on the left aren't going to like me saying this, but it's true. They do not want conservatives to be able to express their views on a platform that they don't control. That's what they want. They want that control. I don't think this applies to everybody on the left. I'm sure that most people on the left are reasonable, but the thing is, this isn't about incitement to violence. They're just using it to push for more censorship. And now they're also using it to push this whole impeachment thing, which is the most ridiculous idea I've ever heard. And even if you don't like Trump, even if you're glad that he's gone, you have to be able to see that this is ridiculous. Even if I'll even go this far. Even if you think that he should be impeached, you have to be able to see that this is a bad strategy. Because the thing is, he's already out of office. So you're going to spend taxpayer money. You're going to use time that you're going to waste the senator's time, and you're going to push us through a whole other impeachment fiasco for no good reason. He's already out of office. And at the most, maybe you'll be able to get it to where he can't run again. But what if he doesn't even want to run again? I mean, yeah, we think he might, but I kind of think that he won't, even if he's able to. But here's the thing. They're basing they're they're basing their whole case on a speech that he gave at the rally shortly before the rioting happened. But here's the thing. First off, he didn't incite any violence during that speech. He didn't tell anybody to go into the Capitol. He didn't tell them to start wrecking stuff. He didn't tell them to riot. All he did was just make his case that the election was stolen from him. Now, I don't agree with that. I'm not convinced that there were enough fraudulent votes to have swung the election Biden's way. I think that people wanted Biden more than Trump. A lot of MAGA people don't like that because they like to think that Trump is just popular everywhere. I'm sorry, he's not. For everybody who loves him, there's a person who hates him. He's a very polarizing figure, and I'm not afraid to say it. So I think he lost at least mostly legitimately. I do believe that there was fraud. There was fraud. It just didn't rise to enough of a level to ensure that Biden won. But even so, he still has the right to express his opinion, and expressing that opinion is not an incitement to violence. He's not the first politician to dispute the results of an election. We've had this happen before. I mean, they were getting on the Republican senators and representatives for objecting to some of the outcomes in certain battleground states. Democrats have done this before. Republicans have done this before, and it wasn't an issue. They didn't pretend that they were inciting violence, but in this case, they did. Now, they know that this isn't true, right? But what they were using as proof is the speech that he gave during that time. But new information came to light, and even CNN and the Washington Post admit that there is plausible evidence that these riots were planned beforehand. In fact, some of that rioting activity happened while he was still giving his speech, but they've discovered that people were already planning to do this beforehand. So if the articles of impeachment are based on his speech, now the rug's been pulled out from under them because they can't really use that. I think they still will. And what they'll do is they'll argue that, oh, well, the comments that he's made in the past push people to be violent. Now, anybody with common sense knows that that's ridiculous. You don't see anybody blaming anybody else's rhetoric for the riots that happened over the summer. But here's the thing. I mean, you did have an activist media that was inflaming things. Do I blame them? Not fully. No, here's where I'll blame them, and also Trump. I think they contributed to an environment in which something like that could happen, and in which violence could happen. But I don't blame them directly for causing the violence. Who do I blame? I blame the people who did it. Okay. I blame the people who actually rioted. It's their fault. They don't have any excuse for being violent. And that applies to Antifa, that applies to the pro-Trump rioters, that applies to Black Lives Matter. And you know what? The majority of people on both sides disagreed with those riots. The majority of people on the left said that people shouldn't be violent. They shouldn't be rioting. Now, I'm talking about the rank and file. I'm not talking about leadership. When it comes to Democratic leadership, not a whole lot of them condemned the violence. There were some. I'm not going to say there were none. But they didn't come out in full force the way Republican lawmakers did when the riots happened at the U.S. Capitol. I mean, you had the vast majority of them coming out and condemning it. I mean, even Biden himself, it took him months before he even addressed the issue, and he still didn't really even condemn them by name. He just said he condemns all political violence. And so the Democrats will say that's good enough. But I mean, if Trump had said that, then it wouldn't be a big deal because, I mean, they're motivated by politics and not by actual truth. So the impeachment thing, and I'm predicting it right now, it's not going to go anywhere. They need, if all 50 senators vote to convict, they still need 17 Republican senators to vote for impeachment. That's not going to happen, especially with these new revelations that came out. They're not willing to risk their political future to vote for a sham impeachment. I mean, I know that there are people in the House who did it, but their careers are basically over. I mean, Liz Cheney, I mean, she's not admitting it, but this is her last term in office because she cast that vote. And I'm sure she'll cast other votes inside with the Democrats as well. So you're not going to have, you're just not, unless Trump does something crazy, they're not going to have the will to vote to impeach Trump for no good reason. So when it comes to impeachment, I think that it is going to backfire. It's going to hurt Democrats more than it's going to help them. They're going to fail to convict, and they'll still see that the media is still going to spin it and make it seem like a victory because they can say that they impeached Trump twice. But nobody gives a shit. I mean, nobody cares. I mean, I'm sorry. The only people that care about that are the Trump haters. So they can have what they think is a victory, but it'll be what they call a Pyrrhic victory, because it's going to be a victory that hurts them in the long run. This impeachment, along with all the stupid crap that they're going to do between now and then, is going to cost them at least one chamber of commerce. I think it's going to cost them both. I think the Senate's going to go back to Republicans, and the House is going to go back to the Republicans. And again, this is contingent on the GOP not being stupid or being too stupid, because I mean, there's always going to be some level of stupid. There's nothing we can do about that. But they need to make sure that they're not rising to the level of stupidity that the Democrats have already gotten to. They're like up here on the stupid meter, and I don't think they're coming down anytime soon. They're not learning their lesson. They're engaging in the same behavior that caused them to lose in 2016, and they don't even see it. So, I mean, when it comes to how things are shaping up over the next 2 years, we'll be talking a lot about that. I'm really hoping that we can get actual conservatives in office. I'm hoping that we can get some of these people who pretend to be conservatives but are really not. I'm hoping that we can get them gone during the primaries, but that'll be another conversation. But the last thing that I want to talk about is the media. I wrote an article, and it was based on an article that Axios put out. And it's not surprising, but in a certain aspect, it kind of is. But it demonstrates a few different things. It demonstrates that the public's trust in the media is even getting lower than it was years ago. I mean, there has been study after study over the past 4 years that have shown that trust in the establishment media is plummeting. But this one that was just released, it's getting even worse for them. But what it also shows is how out of touch they are. Like they like people on the left really seem to not know why the American public doesn't trust the establishment media anymore. To us, it's obvious. To regular people, it's obvious, but to them, it's not. So I'm just going to read off some of these numbers here. So where to go? Let's see. Okay. Wait, that's not it. All right. Sorry about that. Okay, so here's what this found. 56% of Americans agree with the following statement: journalists and reporters are purposely trying to mislead people by saying things they know are false or gross exaggerations. 56% of Americans believe this. This includes Republicans, Democrats, and independents. I'm not sure how it breaks down because they didn't give us that information. But here's the next one. 58% of Americans think that most news organizations are more concerned with supporting an ideology or political position than with informing the public. And then the last one here, let's see. Now, this is kind of interesting too, because when they polled Democrats, 57% of Democrats trust the media and only 18% of Republicans trust the media. Now, the 18% number for Republicans, that's not surprising. But I would have expected the number for Democrats to be higher. It's only 57%. I mean, that's still the majority, but I would have expected that number to be higher, like 65, 70%. And I know that when they're thinking about the media, they're not just thinking about the left-leaning outlets. They're also thinking about Fox News and things like that. So that could account for a lot of that. But the bottom line is that the country knows that the activist media lies to us on a daily basis. And when I say activist media, I'm usually talking about the left, because they are in control of all of the major broadcast media outlets, also print as well. They're in control of that. But I mean, the right has activist media too. And when I say activist media, here's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about commentators like myself, because I'm awesome. No, but commentators are different. I mean, because commentators are honest about their bias. Like when I write my articles, it's clear to the audience that I'm writing from a conservative perspective. There's no problem with that. But if I were trying to say that I'm a total objective journalist, I would be lying, because I'm not. That's the problem. Outlets like CNN, I mean, you look at Don Lemon, Chris Cuomo, they pretend to be actual objective journalists that are just here to give us the facts, but they're very clearly not. You look at, well, MSNBC is actually honest about their bias, so I don't have a problem with them. But if you look at like the Washington Post, the New York Times, CBS, ABC, all of the rest, they have a very evident bias. And here's the thing, it's gotten so much worse over the past 4 years. I remember when I was younger, the media always had a bias, and their reporting was always slanted, but it was nowhere as bad as it's been over the past 4 years. I mean, it's like Trump got elected and they're like, oh no, we're not even going to pretend anymore. Like, we're still going to say we're being objective, but they just went full activists. And that's why I call them the activist media. I don't refer to them as reporters or journalists in general. Most of the time, I refer to them as media activists because that's what they are. And there are some people, there are journalists on the left who are actual journalists, like Matt Taibbi, Glenn Greenwald. I don't agree with their politics. I'm sure if we sat down and had a conversation about politics, we would maybe agree on 10, 20% of the issues. But these people are actually honest. They're willing to check their own side, just like they check Republicans. And, and they're kind of a throwback to the way journalism used to be. And even with them, I'm sure if I read all the reporting, I would be able to detect a left-wing bias. But they don't just go outright full-on hard left bias to where they're just blatantly lying to their audience to promote a political agenda. Like Matt Taibbi is not there to promote a political agenda, as far as I know. Same with Glenn Greenwald, at least not through their reporting. But the thing is that it's gotten so bad that even Democrats are not trusting them the way that they used to, even though they probably agree with them politically. Now, here's the thing. Here's the author that wrote this for Axios. I think his name was Felix Salmon. And they point out a potential solution to this problem. How can the media rebuild trust? A second. Now, to those with common sense, the solution is easy, right? Stop lying. Tell the truth. Stop being so blatantly biased. Or if you're going to be blatantly biased, then let us know that. Don't pretend to be objective. Be honest about who you are. That's easy. If they started doing that, they would start rebuilding trust over time. But here's the interesting part, because in the article, the solution that they propose is based on the fact that the same study found that 61% of Trump voters say that they trust their employer's CEO. So if they work at a company, they trust their CEO, even though they don't trust the media and they don't trust government leaders. Like only 28 said they trusted government leaders. So I'm sure that number would also apply to people on the left as well, 61%, maybe not exact, but since CEOs are a more trusted institution in the United States, their proposal is to have CEOs of major companies try to help rebuild trust in the media by showing that they trust the media. They think that Trump supporters are going to follow what major CEOs say about the media. And I'm like, that is the dumbest thing you guys could have come up with. Like that, like really, like that's what you got from this whole thing? You looked at those numbers and what popped into your head is, hey, 61% trust in CEOs. Let's have the CEOs try to convince conservatives to trust the media again. Wow. No, that's not going to work. You know that's not going to work. And to me, that's even more insult. That's even more of an insult, because to me, all it says is that what you're thinking is we still need to keep lying to the public. We still need to keep pushing a political agenda, but we're just going to try to think of ways to get them to believe our lies and to believe our bias. That's what they're doing. And it's so obvious to anybody who has a modicum of sense. I'm sure even people on regular people on the left would see that and be like, no, that's not how you're going to rebuild trust. It demonstrates one thing, that these people don't sit down with Trump supporters. They don't sit down with conservatives in any meaningful way. I mean, you've got some journalists who will pretend to make a trip to the heartland and try to speak with flyover country, but they're not really doing that. I mean, they're having conversations, but they're not really concerned about what these people think. They're not really trying to understand them. They go back home and then they write hit pieces on them, basically. So I mean, and I'm sure that some of them who actually made those trips were actually sincere. I'm not going to say that this applies to all of them, but for the most part, that's what I'm saying, and anybody can see right through it. So the media, so bottom line with this is the media still doesn't get it. They don't understand why people hate them so much. They don't understand why nobody trusts them anymore. um, and while some of them might understand, they're not committed to actually fixing the problem. They don't really want a solution, so trust in the media is going to keep going down. We're going to have more siloed media. I mean, we already do. We have conservative media and we have left-leaning media, and I always tell people to read both because I mean, I mean, both sides are going to lie to you. I mean, there are plenty of honest people on both sides, but there are even more liars on both sides. So read both sides, and that way you'll get a better feel for you'll get a better overall idea of what happened in a certain story or a certain scenario. But the media, I mean, it still has an influence, right? I mean, 56% don't trust it. That means that at at least 44% does. The number could be lower, but it's still going to be a significant chunk. So we still have to fight against what the media tries to do and how they try to deceive us. But it tells me that there's an opening here. I mean, for people who want to be truth tellers, whether they're biased or not. Again, I have no problem with commentators. I don't have a problem with Sean Hannity. I don't have a problem with Rachel Maddow. I don't agree with Rachel Maddow's politics, and I probably disagree with Hannity on a lot of things, but they're honest. I mean, they're not pretending to be objective reporters. So I think it's going to get to the point to where it's even more siloed than it is right now. But I do see an opening for people who actually want the truth, people who are actually seeking the truth. And the way, in my opinion, the way you know that is if a certain journalist is honest, is how willing are they to take on their own party? And I don't mean from the sense that if it's a Democrat, you're going to criticize them for not being left wing enough. I mean, that's easy. That's a cop out. I mean, if I complained about somebody like a senator not being conservative enough, yeah, I'm still criticizing my own party, but it doesn't really mean much. I mean, criticize them when they blatantly do something wrong. Like I would criticize Trump. Like during the riots, I criticized Trump. I was criticizing Trump all day because I believe that the way he handled that whole thing was incredibly inept. But we need more people on the left who are willing to do that to the left, but they're not. I mean, if Biden does something that is harmful, they're not going to call him out. But the way you know who the honest ones are, they're willing to call them out. You may not agree 100% with their take, but they're at least willing to take on their own party. If they see some corruption happening in the Biden administration, they'll criticize it, or they'll at least report on it so that you have the facts. That's how you know that somebody's honest. That's how you know that somebody's authentic. If they only have a certain point of view, and their point of view changes depending on the political affiliation of the person that they're praising or criticizing, then they're not real. They're just partisans. They just want to help their team. So I think I'm going to end it right there. I'm going to figure out why the chat isn't working. I don't know if there's something that I have to do with YouTube, but I'll figure it out so that next time I do a live stream, you guys can join in and add to the conversation. But please go ahead and subscribe if you haven't already. That helps me out a lot. Leave a comment, and share this video. I would really appreciate it. And I will see you back in the Twitterverse.